Books, one of the main symbols of self-improvement. When you think about books, you think about success, intelligence, and knowledge. All the self-improvement advice tells you to read. They tell you that all the successful people read, like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and Kanye.
I actually haven't read any book. Reading is like eating Brussels sprouts for me.
Never mind. And so it's done. You're sold. You too will join the elite and start reading. After searching out what to read, you head to Amazon to make your orders. You buy Rich Dad Poor Dad. You buy How to Win Friends and Influence People, Think and Grow Rich, all the popular self-improvement books. You begin to read and you love it. So you start reading more and more. You're feeling motivated, you're feeling inspired. Now you're trying to read one book a week and you're tallying it all up. You're feeling good. A few months down the line, you're still at it, but life hasn't exactly changed. You get moments of inspiration and motivation, but there is no action that follows it. You begin to realize that all these books are kind of saying the same thing, just presenting it with different stories and analogies. You begin to look at older books you may have read only a few months ago and realize that you'd forgotten basically everything it said in that book. All the key principles, all the key learnings, gone. You start feeling frustrated. I thought reading was meant to help me. I thought reading would improve my life. And now I'm here with a bookshelf full of books and I've gone nowhere. I still feel the same. I still have the same bad habits. I'm not successful yet. There was a few things that's happened to me recently that made me realize that I'd been reading self-improvement books wrong and there was a lot of room for improvement. For one, I picked up a book I'd already read called Unscripted by MJ DeMarco. It's his follow-up to The Millionaire Fastlane, which I recommend to read. And as I'm flicking through these pages, I decided, you know what, let me sit down and read this again. And I remember reading it again and feeling like I was reading a completely different book. Even though I remember enjoying this book and I didn't read it too long ago, it felt like I'd never read it before. And this wasn't because I was understanding stuff differently or some life experience had changed my perception. It was simply because I had forgotten majority of the information in this book. Like there were so many gems in there that were relevant to my life at that point, and I realized if I had that in front of me, I may have made better decisions. I may have done stuff differently. But somehow, those pieces of information had been lost on me. And then I started to think, how many other books are like this? How many other books do I remember enjoying and I probably couldn't recall anything inside or something very minute? The second thing that made me realize was, upon evaluating my self-improvement journey, I came to the conclusion that my life hasn't improved in correlation with the books I've read. And that's not to say I've read a lot of books, but it's more about the content inside and the practicality and how useful it was to me at that particular point. A lot of them had a lot of things to say and a lot of useful things, but I hadn't actually taken action to apply it. So it just ended up as knowledge. And I know they try to say knowledge is power, but I like the saying knowledge is potential power, because unless you do something with that knowledge, it doesn't really mean anything. And that's how I felt growing up in these last few years, that I have the knowledge. I've read enough self-improvement books to know what I need to do, but yet I haven't done it. So reading more self-improvement books at this particular time isn't going to do much. And the third thing was, I started to question why I was reading a particular book, and I realized that a lot of my answers were, oh, the book's meant to be good, or I'm just reading because reading is good. There was no real purpose behind it and no real clear motivation and intention other than, yeah, I might as well. And this came about when I started to notice that a lot of the self-improvement books do say the same thing, just packaged in a different way. The problems I find with reading self-improvement books is, if you're not careful, they can become just as hindering as other bad habits like video games. I made a video on that, please go check that out. But the difference is, it's not as apparent because it presents the illusion of improvement. For one, self-improvement books can be very addicting because they are very inspirational. They do get you hyped up. You're motivated to change your life, learn a new habit, build a skill, build a new life and whatever. And it can really leave you feeling on top of the world. And honestly, they can fuel you for a week or two where you just feel like, yeah, I'm gonna go get it. I'm gonna go do it. And soon enough, you will come off that high. But then you read another one and you're back up on top of the world. But after a while, you can look back on all the books you read and you realize that your life hasn't changed in the ways the book intended it to. Now they're just there for the dopamine rush, but you still feel good and you still feel like you are improvement, because in a sense you still are accumulating knowledge. You're accumulating methods and ways to improve, but it's not going anywhere. And then you read so many that all of that information becomes muddled up. It becomes almost invaluable. Yeah, you may learn 10 things you need to do for this, but then you have another 20, 30 things you need to do for that. And it becomes a lot. It becomes very overwhelming. For example, if a book tells you 5 things you should do in your morning routine and one of them is working out, but you've read a book on fitness and you've read 10 tips to help you with your fitness. Now you've got those 5 things to do, then you've got 10 things to remember just for one of those 5 things, and it just starts getting crazy. And because self-improvement really pushes the idea of being better than everyone else and working harder than everyone else, a sense of ego can infiltrate the activity of reading, and now you're not reading for the actual benefits, you're reading for the image it presents, to appear more successful, to appear more knowledgeable, to appear more disciplined. Reading is now about how many books you can read in a year, or how quickly you can read them, or the certain titles you've been reading. You're more proud of what you've read rather than the lessons you've learned for said book, or how this certain book has changed your life. Remember, these are self-help books. You need to be helped. These are self-improvement books. You have to want improvement, like truly want this improvement. And so that being said, given the title of this video, what can you do to make sure you are reading properly, or you are getting the most out of reading these self-improvement books, and I guess books in general? Number one, and the biggest one, and by YouTube fashion, I should have this at the end, but I'm going to say it first: read with a purpose. Everything you read should be read with a purpose. You should know exactly why you are reading your current book. Do not read self-improvement books just for the sake of reading them. They should be relevant to you in some form, whether that's now or in the near future. Far too many people read a lot of self-improvement books because they are popular, because they see them on all the YouTubers' lists. They don't stop and think, is this book actually relevant to me? Can this book actually help me right now? Is it something that's going to benefit me? Is it something that I can utilize? And I understand you're not going to know straight away whether a book can be beneficial, but you can certainly gauge it based off the topic alone. But the best way I would say to read books is read books that solve a current problem you are facing now, or going to be facing in the near future. They are always going to be relevant. If you need to learn about finance, buy a book on finance. If you want to learn about spirituality, or you're struggling, buy a book on spirituality. If you want to start getting into yoga, buy a book about yoga. If you're planning on starting a startup, or you have started a startup, buy a book on startups. Buy a book on business. If you're struggling with something, or there's some obstacle or something you need to solve, go buy a book around that topic. And I do understand that self-improvement books can be very general, and that's why there's no point reading a ton of them, because they're all going to be talking general. They're all going to be saying the same thing. Be strategic in what you read and when you read it, because truthfully, some books are just meant to be read at a different time in your life, because you're not ready to hear this information. You're not ready to act upon it. For example, I bought a book on property investment when I have no interest in property investment. I'm in no place to be a property investor. So what really is the point? Like, the book may be good, but I can't really use anything inside the book because I'm just simply not ready. Maybe in the future I will be, but there's no point me reading it now. The only caveat is reading out of curiosity, and this slightly falls out the realm of self-improvement, but as a general rule of thumb, read what interests you. But just remember, a lot of these self-improvement books require action. Another way to read properly is completely remove the ego. You are reading for yourself, not to look a certain way and not to present a certain image. This is for your benefit only. You don't need to post on social media. You don't need to brag about what you're reading. And I'm not saying you shouldn't feel proud, but when the amount of books or the titles of the books becomes more important and you feel more proud about that than the content inside, it's kind of an indication you are reading for the wrong reasons. The next thing you can do is remove all distractions. If you sit down to read, remove everything you can. Notifications on your phone, social media, background music, people, noise. This is time for you to focus with this book. You need to focus on the material, on the lessons, on the information and the story it's trying to tell. And there are some books that you probably can read half-heartedly. You're not going to extract as much value as you possibly can from it. The next one is take your time to reflect and absorb. Building off the ego part when I talk about speed reading and trying to read as many books, to really grasp the concept and the lessons inside, you need to stop and take your time and start thinking. If you read something that challenges your way of thinking or changes your perspective, right? Stop, put the book down, just think about it, debate with yourself, question it, decipher it. Explore what it potentially means for you, for others. Go deeper into the meaning. Apply it to your life or someone else's life. Compare it to your surroundings and really try and understand what the book is saying. Whatever you need to do, but when you do stuff like this, that's how you comprehend what you're reading. And that's how you really absorb the content, by thinking. The next thing is to reread the books you do find valuable. Once you finish the book that you found valuable, go back and reread it sometime, whether it's in a few weeks or in a few months. Combined with other stuff in this video, it allows you to now understand stuff differently. Now you may read the same thing you did a couple weeks ago, but due to life experience or something, now its meaning has changed. Now you understand it on a deeper level, or now you have completely different ideas to challenge it with, and maybe you think what is said there is not correct. Either way, your understanding of it will change, it will develop. Rereading books is the key to help things stick longer, and also just help you remember certain things you have lost. So the last one is apply and take action, and this is probably the most important one, and you've probably heard it a million times before, but it is that important that without this, it doesn't matter what you do. You need to put into practice what you have learned. If the author says, do this, try this, do it and try it. If the author lays out 10 steps, do as many steps as you possibly can. Because I've had this feeling for a long time where I have all the knowledge, I know the steps, and without taking them, it doesn't mean anything, because knowledge is only potential power. Applied knowledge is where the power comes from. But this is why reading with a purpose is so important, especially when it comes to these self-improvement books. Say for example, you're reading to solve a problem, then you should be able to apply the majority of what it says, because it is directly relevant to you. It's going to directly help you. Of course, there'll be some stuff you cannot do because of circumstances or environment. That's fair. But if you've picked up a book because you have a problem and you can't apply anything, then maybe that book isn't right for you, or maybe you're reading it wrong, or maybe this thing is not even a problem. If your morning routine sucks and you feel like it's holding you back, then you go read a book on morning routine, say The Miracle Morning. Take action. Do what he says. Start that miracle morning. That's the only way you're going to solve your problem. Remember, self-help is about helping you. You have to be willing to be helped. You have to be willing to put in the effort to improve. You need to be helped. Being inspired or motivated has its merits, but for one, it's unsustainable and it doesn't mean anything. I've been motivated to start projects and I've never have started them. It didn't get me anywhere. So apply, take action, do the tips and tricks, do all the challenges it says. Make this book worthwhile. But yeah, I'm not here to criticize anyone. If you like to read, go ahead and read. And then if you really enjoy reading, you're probably at an advantage, I'll be honest. If you don't agree with me, that's fine. It's up to you. I just like to make sure that you out there have thought about stuff, because there are a lot of things in self-improvement that sounds really good, but you don't actually stop and think, is it beneficial? What's the pros and cons, you know? Am I just blindly following? It sounds good, so you follow, but I just want you to think about it and come to your own conclusions and truly understand what you're doing and the decisions you're making. So that's the reason for the video. If you don't agree, you don't agree. Have a good day. It's been your butt of choice. I don't do intros. We're just going to cut the video.